Thank you all for coming. And right now, what we're going to have a little panel discussion, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And my pleasure to introduce to you the University of Iowa Sports Information Director Emeritus, Mr. Phil Hattie.
I guess I'm back again. Now this is the first of 3 panels we're going to have this afternoon. This first one's going to deal primarily, we're going to talk about with some people that were very, very close to Dr. Christine Grant and Bump Elliott. So we're going to have some good talks about those people. There's another panel, just so you know, about 2 o'clock, and that's going to be about Hayden Frye, and it's going to be with the sports writers. We're going to have Mike Loss, Pat Hardy, Steve Batterson, and Rick Brown, all people that worked with Hayden through the years. And then the final panel is going to be people reminiscing on Hayden Frye's stories, and actually I'll be part of that panel. Myself, Don Patterson, Marv Cook, and Dale Ahrens. So hopefully you'll be around for all of those. But for this panel right now, first of all, I want to introduce our panelists, and I'll start right away and have him stand up. Dwayne Banks. Dwayne Banks was head baseball coach at the University of Iowa from 1970 to 1997. His career record at Iowa was 810, 575. He led the Hawkeyes to 3 Big Ten championships and 3 NCAA tournament appearances, including the 1972 College World Series. He was named Big Ten Coach of the Year in 1990. He coached 6 All-Americans, 31 All-Big Ten players, 33 academic All-Americans, and 57 players who signed professional contracts. Dwayne Banks. Gail Blevins, head coach of Iowa softball from 1988 to 2010, with 1,245 wins in 31 total years as a head coach. She ranked 2nd all-time in NCAA Division I softball victories. Gail Blevins led the Hawkeyes to 16 NCAA tournaments, 4 College World Series appearances, 5 Big Ten regular season championships, and 2 Big Ten tournament titles. A member of the National Fast Pitch Coaches Association Hall of Fame and the Iowa Athletics Hall of Fame, Gail Blevins. Dan Gable. From 1976 to 1997, Dan Gable served as the head wrestling coach at the University of Iowa. His teams compiled a dual meet record of 355, 21, and 5 ties. He coached 152 All-Americans, 45 national champions, 106 Big Ten champions, and 12 Olympians. His teams won 21 Big Ten championships and 15 NCAA titles. Dan Gable. And finally, Dr. Amy Wilson. The managing director of inclusion with the NCAA, Dr. Wilson received her PhD in sports studies at the University of Iowa under the tutelage of Dr. Christine Grant. She now leads on the diversity areas of gender equity, Title IX, and LGBTQ issues at the NCAA. She is the primary staff liaison to the Committee on Women's Athletics and to the Gender Equity Task Force for the NCAA, Dr. Amy Wilson. We welcome them all here for our panel today, and we would like to say we're talking today about 2 athletic directors, Bump Elliott and Dr. Christine Grant. And I worked myself very closely with both of them, and I will say, and this is no disrespect to athletic directors we've had since, Bob Bowlesby or Gary Barta, but with Christine Grant and Bump Elliott, they broke the mold. right there, and I'll say that unequivocally. Those were two of the finest people, and Dr. Grant still is, that I've ever known, and I'm very, very proud that I was able to work with them. I worked for the university 42 years, and they were there for a large portion of that time, and these folks did too. So we're going to go around, and I just, as we're talking, we're going to talk back and forth, pick up your mics and talk, but I want you to give good memories, because Dan and Dwayne, you worked also with Christine, and you folks there, you worked with Bump, and you know what kind of people they were. But I'm going to go, first of all, we're just going to go down the line here, and I want you to give your initial impressions of the both. Then we'll just have some back and forth talking about the two athletic directors, why they were what they were, why they were so good, and what they did. But first, let's go to Dan Gable, and like I said, you can talk Bump, you can talk Christine, whatever you want, because we're all on this panel.
Yes, I have a lot to say, but I'm going to keep my message down as good as I can. But I was an Iowa Stater, and one of the first things, they put me into Bump Elliott's office, and he just looked at me and he said, I know that Coach Kurtelmeyer is wanting you to be his head assistant. We'd love to get you here. And every time you do something good here at the University of Iowa, if you come see me. He said that. That meant a lot to me. But I don't think he realized that we were going to do something good just about every year for 25 years that I was here. And so he might have hoped that I forgot he said that, because every year I did come in. And he looked at me after the first year and he just said, I know why you're here. And he honored everything. But what he really liked was the fact that I didn't come in and I just, like, he looked at me and I think he said this, he said, I suppose you want some more money. Well, I said, no. I said, did you see the wrestlers, how beat up they were? He goes, I thought you did that to them. I said, no, it was our facility, our wrestling mats. They were horrible. I would like new wrestling mats. And so he really liked that. You know, so that was one of his, he was always concerned not just about the coach, he was concerned about the coach being concerned about what his situation was for the athletes. So another time we got in some trouble, and he called me in. And I don't know if some of you people are old enough to watch a morning show called Captain Kangaroo, but there was a person on that show called Tom Terrific, and he had this hat on, and the steam came out of the hat, and all of a sudden I looked at Bump and here was steam coming out of the top of his head because we got in some kind of a trouble. And it was a little as like a wrestler got in a fight with a football player or a basketball player, and he slammed his fist down and he said, I will not tolerate disloyalty within our own athletic department. Athletes don't fight other athletes, at least on the same team. And that's the University of Iowa. So you remember these types of things that were really valuable to you as a coach. So Christine Grant, unbelievable pusher of women's athletics, girls athletics, unbelievable. And what sport is benefiting probably the most of any sport right now, because we have went to the other gender. Right now, across the United States, we've probably got 35 states that are sanctioning female wrestling. We don't have it Iowa yet full-time, and we need that. But we have made leaps and bounds. And at the world and Olympic level, we just had 4 medals from the United States of America in female wrestling, 5 in male wrestling. But she has a lot to do with that unbelievable effort, not just in wrestling, but the total one. But my focus is always pretty narrow, and that sport of wrestling has always meant a lot to me. So I summed it up right there. Is that good?
That's excellent. And actually, I could have been a forerunner. I tried to teach my wife the sport of wrestling 30 years ago, but she was having nothing to do with it. So,
What you know what? I'm not going to say. Goodbye.
maybe I was the wrong coach. I don't know.
I'm going to get started.
Okay, next we're going to go to Dr. Wilson, and we'll let you give your thoughts. I'm not sure how well you knew Bump, but talk about Dr. Grant and Bump Elliott, and
Sure.
take all the time you want.
Well, thank you very much. And let me just start with, as an Iowa alum, what an honor it is to be on the stage with these 3 legendary coaches. So such an honor to be here with all of you. And so I made one of the smartest decisions in my life in the early 2000s. I read an article about Dr. Grant in the NCAA News back when we read real newspapers that we held in our hands, that talked about her career at Iowa and that she was retiring from being the women's athletics director, but that she would continue to teach in the graduate program at Iowa in sport and health studies. And so I decided I'm going to quit my full-time job. I want to work in athletics and make a difference for women in sport and just in sport overall. And I left Illinois and came to Iowa, and not only got to learn from and be mentored by people like Christine Grant, but professors like Bonnie Slatton and Susan Burrell and a number of others who were just fantastic. And so it was the best decision I ever made. And so when I came to Iowa, I was there as Christine was finishing teaching. So I'm known as her last PhD student. I just turned 50, and I swear for the rest of my life, if everybody just wants to call me Dr. Grant's last PhD student, that will be fine with me. It's an honor to know that I got to learn from her. And so what I will say about Dr. Grant is that I didn't get to experience Iowa athletics with her at the lead, so you're certainly going to hear from that here. But what I do know very well is the impact that she has had on women's sports nationally. And Coach Gable already talked about that, but it was Christine in the 70s, along with many of her colleagues, who really started women's sports at the college level through an association they created, the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, and then championed Title IX, and we really have that law today because of Christine and other leaders who were able to keep that. So on a national level, that's her legacy, that her whole life was dedicated to making sure that there were opportunities for student athletes, girls and women across the country. And it's my great honor at the NCAA to oversee the emerging sport program for women, and so Go Women's Wrestling. That's one of my jobs, to help to make sure that continues to grow. And so at the NCAA, I will say that we have a ballroom, our largest room in the building, and it's named the Christine Grant Ballroom. Every day when I come into that building, I think about her, I think about her legacy. And what she taught me as a PhD student was how important it is to have a philosophy, to have a value system, and to be consistent with that, and that the decisions that we make should be in the best interest of our student athletes and those who teach and lead them, the coaches, the administrators. So I'm proud to be here and to have a chance to talk about her. And while I never had the honor to meet Bump Elliott, I spoke to Christine this morning, and I said, "Is there anything you'd like me to share?" And she said, "I have one sentence for you. If I could have chosen any athletic director across the country, any male athletic director to work with, it would have been Bump Elliott every single time." And so that was her message today, to make sure that was on record. So again, an honor to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
The one thing I think you'll all agree with me, that there were split athletic departments in only a few spots in the country. Just a few spots. I think Iowa and maybe Minnesota, and that was it. So having 2 athletic directors was pretty unusual. The one thing that I always noticed is the undeniable, as you just mentioned, respect that Bump had for Christine and that Christine had for Bump. A number of people said to Bump, why don't you become athletic director for the entire, in his answer many times was, why do I want to become athletic director when she is doing the kind of job that no one else could do? She's doing a wonderful job, and he said, I hope she feels that way about me. They had that mutual respect for each other, and that's why it stayed that way. There was the men's athletic director and there was the women's athletic director, and what an unusual occurrence that the two top athletic directors, in my opinion, in the country were at the same school. So in many ways, you know, is this heaven? No, it's Iowa, but we're so blessed to be at the University of Iowa and to have worked for people like this. So the next person I'm bringing up is our former baseball coach, Dwayne Banks. Dwayne, you came just about the same time that Bump Elliott was hired. Right?
Well, I was hired by Evashevsky. That's how many, that's a while ago. But Evie hired me, and then, of course, Bump came in after Evie. And, boy, what a great hire. I mean, we had to put up with him more in baseball because he was a former baseball player, too. So every game, he never missed a game, and he'd always second-guess me the next day. He'd say, why you do this, why you do that? I said, Bump, you were a punch-and Judy hitter. I said, you played when there was no fences, you hit it in the gap, and you run like hell and score a run, you think it's a home run. So, I mean, but what a tremendous person. We were so fortunate to have both of these people at each end of the hall. And Christine would come by after we'd either win or lose, and she always picked you up, whether you won or whether you lost. She always knew the right thing to say, and that was really nice. But the great thing I think that Bump brought was family. You know, everybody was important. It wasn't football up here and then everyone else down here. Everyone was on the same plane, and that really made it easy for us. Bump always told the coaches, if you have a problem, come and see me. If you don't have a problem, I don't need to see you. And if we had a problem, he would help us solve it. And he was great. He was absolutely the best. I worked for 3 athletic directors with Evie, Bump, and Bob, and all 3 of them had different traits, but they were good. But Bump was way up here because he wanted every sport to be the best that they could be, and I think we really worked hard to do that. I got to tell you a story about, I see Earl Murphy over here. Murph, you dog, you. Murph used to own a clothing store downtown, and he never missed a baseball game. And some days we would play when it was a bit nippy out there, and some days it was cold. So Murph always brought a sleeping bag, and he'd always sit next to my wife, and she would come home. So Murph and I were in the same sleeping bag together watching your game, and I said, what the hell? What's going on here? Murph, you son of a gun. I tell you. But he was great. But getting back to, I had to say that, Murph. Getting back to Bump, I mean, we were really, really fortunate. I used to play a lot of golf with Bump, and great competitor, and he would always jab you now and then, and he would tease you, but you always knew that he had your back, and it was so important, and we were so fortunate to have Christine and Bump at the same time.
Yes, we were. And by the way, there was supposed to be another panelist today, and that was Joey Elliott, the wife of Bobby, who we lost, and the son of Bump. And she had a sickness in the family, a serious sickness, so that's why she's not here today. So our final panelist is Gail Blevins, and how do I say this? She was, without, there's no question in my voice, the best softball coach that Iowa's ever had, and her record speaks for itself. And this is nothing against who we've had since or who we have now or anything, but I kind of miss seeing you out there in the field right now. So Gail Blevins, you were the best and you worked for the best. So tell us a little bit about your thinking on our ADs.
Well, I could tell you that I did. I worked for the best in coming to Iowa. In fact, I tell so many people that Christine Grant was my reason for coming to Iowa, because I wanted to know what it was like to work for the very best athletic director in the country. And I was never disappointed. And I told Christine that many times. I was never disappointed. I learned a lot of lessons from her, incredible lessons. I can remember one very early where I came in to complain about something that I wasn't happy about in the program, and she sat very quietly and listened to me the entire time. When I finished, she said, "And what's your solution?" I didn't come in with an answer. I just came in to complain. And she told me very quickly, she said, "You come back and see me when you have an answer." I never went back to see her again until I had thoroughly thought out what my solution was going to be from that point forward. I have to tell you a great story about Bump, too. I was not even on the job a day, and I was coming in Carver Hawkeye, and I ran into Bump. He knew who I was. He knew where I came from. He knew my background. He knew everything about me. And he was not even directly my athletic director. But that tells you what a tremendous man and tremendous athletic director he was. And we were so very fortunate. I've told so many people I was at Iowa at the right time. I was so very thankful to work under Christine's tutelage, along with Bump Elliott. And so many of my colleagues across the country were envious of what we had. They were envious because they knew that this was not this way. Lots of places across the country, it simply wasn't. So I was very, very fortunate to be here at the right time. So very thankful that I had Christine to talk with on a regular basis, to bump shoulders with Bump and see him everywhere, downstairs in the equipment room. It didn't matter what floor you were on, Bump had a presence there. So he cared about all of his people. He cared about all of his staff. He loved everybody. And I think Dwayne said it best. You know, it was all about family. It was all about family. And we had something really, really special, which will always be special to me. And I'm so thankful for the time I got to spend with Christine and with Bump.
You know, one thing about both Dr. Christine Grant and Bump Elliott is you worked your butt off, and I don't mean just the coaches, everybody, because they were such father, parent figures. You did not want to disappoint them. And that's one reason everybody worked so hard, and it was indeed family. I've said this many times in many speeches, but the early 1980s, early 1990s, they can talk about all they want right now, but to me that was the golden era of Iowa athletics, and that's because of the leadership we had. Bump and Barb Elliott, for example, before many of the early football games every season, had the entire staff over to their house for a kickoff party every year. And Barb Elliott, you know, you talk about angels. She was, Bump was the father to all of us, and Barb was the mother to all of us. And the same can be said of Christine. I mean, what she did for women's athletics can't be replicated, and there needs to be at some time a book written on that lady for what she has done for college athletics and field hockey, everything else you can name, because she brought in the best. And Bump Elliott would never call, if he called you in the office, you probably did something wrong. Otherwise, he'd let you do your job, and he'd let you do it to the best of your ability. And if there was a call from his secretary, can you come down and see Bump? You started saying to yourself, what did I do wrong? Because you probably did something that was wrong. And I remember one of our sports, I'm not going to say which one, none of these, got in trouble once. And he said, of all the sports to get in trouble with at Iowa, I get in trouble over that. But just a wonderful person. So I'd like to let's just go down the line again. I'd like you to just, you know, tell some more stories about working with them and how you feel, you know, Bump Elliott. Like we said, that was family. you know, and it was everything was considered family. Now it's more of a, and that's not a reflection on the people we work with now, but it's a business. You know, we're talking millions and millions of dollars, but back then it was family. Everybody in the department wanted everybody to succeed, and that's just the way it was, and everybody helped everybody else. But Dan, when you came into Iowa, you went to school at a junior college in Ames, and we still were able to bring you in, and we took you in as part of our family, and you became a Hawkeye.
Yeah, it wasn't one-sided, even though it could be. If you were getting in trouble as a coach, or if your team was getting in trouble, that was one-sided. That couldn't happen anymore. But he did have a really good heart. And by that, if all of a sudden you pleaded your case about one of your athletes, that he was probably at the borderline and that he thought you would need to get rid of that athlete, but if you pleaded the case and it hit a sentimental piece of him because he had that, besides being ornery, he would go your way and give him another chance. And that's really valuable. And almost every time he did that for me, it came through positively, and that is why I could probably come back in and have a second opportunity to plead a case. But you had to prove yourself, and you had to stay right. And that's what really made the difference on my teams and in my life, because, you know, when you got a wife and you got 4 daughters and then you got a lot of guys, you know, you sometimes got to give a little and you take a little, and when you learn from somebody, it's always valuable.
And you're right, and Bump he modeled his department a lot of after his own family, because he was very close. He had 2 brothers, Pete and Jim, that were both great athletes, and he had a sister who lived in Iowa City in the latter part of her life. But his family was very close, and that's the way he tried to make his department, and I think that's also the way Christine made her family. Everybody was good. Amy, wouldn't you say that was a pretty good indicator of Christine also?
Yeah, it was, and we've been talking a little about getting in trouble and how people handle getting in trouble. One of my favorite Christine stories that she told our graduate class was under Coach Vivian Stringer, whom she was very proud to have hired and brought to Iowa, that got written up by the fire marshal for overpacking the stadium for, you know, women's basketball games. So, in fact, you were there. That's awesome. And she framed that and hung it on her wall. So she didn't get in trouble very often, but I know that was one time that she was really proud to get in trouble, because that was a major accomplishment, you know, to oversell an arena. And I think they were calling the radio stations and telling people to turn around. There's no room. Don't come. And they kept coming. The lights makes me think of the Field of Dreams, and here come the lights to the field, right? So no, that's one of my favorite stories. And then, you know, I'll just say that what she modeled was, you know, she was the national leading expert on Title IX. It's all she did at Iowa, but when she would travel around the country, if she were going to talk about gender equity in Title IX, that room was packed and you could hear a pin drop, because she knew her facts. She knew where things stood. She knew what the answer was. And, you know, still working? Oh. And that's what, you know, she knew the facts, and she talked a lot about being educated and being ready to, you know, so we're still working with her legacy, and now I'm at the table trying to handle some of those problems as well. But no, I think back to that fire marshal, it's one of my favorite stories. It's not only what she did for women's athletics here, but, you know, what she did for sports across the country. And she cared about all student athletes. It was never women's against the men's sports. It was really about if we love our sons and daughters, we love our brothers and sisters, our nieces and nephews, we want all of them to have this amazing experience in athletics. And, you know, it's hard to argue with that. I think that was a great point that she always made.
And Gail, you were pretty darn successful coach at Indiana. Why Iowa? Why, you know, beside Christine, of course, but, you know, what made you make the change?
Well, Christine was the biggest part, for me, because I knew the success that we had had there, and I thought, what would it be like to have someone like her as my leader? I mean, that was really powerful, and I thought so hard about that. It's like, if I had someone like Christine as my boss, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of what we can do. And so that was really fun. And, you know, she didn't know a whole lot about softball, I would tell you that. It was fun educating her, unlike what Bump and Dwayne went through with baseball. Christine probably did that with the field hockey coach, where she might maybe question the next day a couple calls, but not with softball. But, you know, it was just so fun. I just knew that we could do something really special here, because I'd been to Iowa. I watched the Iowa community. I knew the support that was here, and then I knew Christine. And I thought, you put all those things together, that's a win-win. And it was a win-win, because I knew what the Iowa people would support. I knew they would support our program, and I knew Christine would get behind us, and she did. And I still remember the first time we went to the World Series, and she went with us. And by the way, her birthday was that weekend. We kept her out at the field. We had extra inning ball game that went until, I think, 1:30 in the morning. She stayed right out there with us, even though she had a flight to catch the next morning. We went back to her room, and at 2:30 in the morning, we had chocolate cake in Dr. Grant's room celebrating her birthday. And she told me it was the most memorable birthday she had ever had. So it meant so much to me that she was there enjoying these women and really being connected to them. So, you know, when I think about why I came, what I experienced was exactly what I thought it would. And I'm so thankful for all the people that are Iowa, that continue to be Iowa. I'm so thankful that I got to be with the very best athletic director, and I got the pleasure of also being there with Bump Elliott.
You know, a number of people asked me today, where's Christine today and how is she feeling? How is it? Do you know that? Could you tell us how she's doing?
Well, she's struggling in terms of her health right now. Is that fair to say, Bonnie? You know, she is. And so I would just ask that you keep her in your prayers. You know, she's a good woman, and I was over to see her. We're pretty close neighbors, and I get a chance to see her on a pretty regular basis. And, you know, her niece is here taking care of her, and you just got to love this woman. And, you know, she was there for all of us. And so my thoughts are, let's all say a little prayer for her and help her to get back on her feet. She's just health-wise is struggling and has been for a while. And any prayer that you want to throw up for, I would just say send it up, because this woman has done so much for so many of us. The least we can do is try and lift her up too.
Dwayne, now you were pretty close to Bump all through the years. What's maybe your favorite Bump Elliott story, or think on that a little bit, because there weren't many baseball games, even in cold weather, where he didn't always at least make an appearance.
No, he was always there for us. I think the thing that we keep forgetting about Christine and Bump is that they were athletes to begin with, then they were coaches, and then they were athletic directors. And I think that really helps in what we do as coaches, because they have been there and they have seen what we're going through. And Bump was just, I mean, there's so many. When we would go to events, and Phil knows this, we would go to an event, Bump would never get to the plane on time. He was always a half hour late. So what we ended up doing is if we were going to leave at 5 to go to some place to speak, then we would tell Bump he needs to be there at 4:30, get there at 5, and we take off, and he thinks he's on time. So, but we had to do that all the time. But I mean, he was so special. You know, he would come to baseball games, and he was just great to be around. I played a lot of golf with Bump. I got very close to him, and he was really a special person. Everything he did for the kids first and for the coaches second, because he wanted the kids to be happy, and he knew if they were happy, the coaches would be. I got together a all-star team from the Big Ten. We were going to play in a tournament in the Netherlands, and I was going to pick two players from each team. At that time, we were the Big Ten, and there was going to be 3 of the other coaches with that had been in the Big Ten the longest, and we had it all set. And then Bump gets a phone call from Jim Delaney, and Jim said that the council or whoever decided that we can't take all-star teams out of the country. And I mean, we had tickets bought, we had everything set up in Holland, and we were ready to go. So, boy, I was devastated. I had to call all the kids and all the coaches and say it's off. And then about a few hours after this happened, Bump came by and he says, if you can keep this trip under this certain amount of money, then you pick kids from your own team and you go and represent the Big Ten. And I thought that was really neat, so I did. I got a ragtag team together, and we went over and played 4 games, went 2-2, beat Canada and beat Italy. We had no business beating either one of them, but the games didn't mean anything. You just play and have fun. But for Bump Elliott to do that, he could have said, well, it's too bad, maybe next time. But he was so concerned about how much effort we had put into this that he gave our kids, we took 17 kids over, and he gave 17 kids an opportunity to travel overseas and see different parts of the world, which probably all of them will never go back to the Netherlands. But it was a great experience for him, and it was all because of Bump Elliott.
Okay, we're going to go give you each a chance to give final thoughts on these 2 great athletic directors, and then we'll wrap it up. And if anybody wants, maybe we'll take a question or 2 from out there in the crowd. But Gail, we'll start with you. Your final thoughts, and before you start, I'll say it. I've said it before. I think both of these athletic directors, sometimes I get a little mushy about it, but I think they both walk on water, and they did such an unbelievable job. I don't know anyone who disrespects or really dislikes Dr. Grant or Bump Elliott, and I mean, that's pretty hard to do. We've had, in 50 plus years at the University of Iowa, 1 sole women's athletic director and 3 men's athletic directors. And if you're talking about football, 2 football coaches in 40 years, that just doesn't happen in the NCAA. And part of the reason it happens here is because of the leadership. So give us your final thoughts or anything you'd like to say on either of those 2 right now.
Well, I'm just glad you're here to hear these coaches' comments and Amy's comments, because when I was asked to do this, as soon as I found out what it was, I was going to clear my calendar. I was going to be here in whatever way I could, because that's what I owe. I owe Christine my professional life, and I owe Bump Elliott for creating a wonderful environment for men and women. And we just had something very special, and it will always remain special to me, the rest of my life, always.
Thanks, Gail. I'll just say that, we've talked about these 2 amazing leaders as administrators, and I'll just close by saying that Christine Grant was also an amazing teacher, and I'm lucky to have learned from her. And there are, coaches and administrators all over the country who also got to be in her classroom that are leading in athletics, that are making a real difference. And she wished she could have been here. She goes, I can't come today. And I said, I know that, and we'll tell you about it. And but she doesn't like this sort of stuff because it's never been about her. It was always about the impact that she could have. And I think the best way we can honor her legacy is to think about opportunities in education and making sure we're continuing that those are equitable and we're doing the right thing in those spaces. That's the best way that we can honor her legacy. And I'll be grateful always to have learned from her, and will spend the rest of my life working on those important issues in her honor. So thank you. And while I didn't get to meet Bump Elliott, I've sure enjoyed hearing those stories today. And I know, again, Christine thought the world of him. And I can tell her I made sure I said that, because she said, you know, to do that. So thanks again.
You know, I'm really honored today to be up here with Gail and with Dan. What they have done in their respective sports will not be duplicated, ever. I mean, Gail was so much fun to work with. We shared facilities, and if she needed a girl to come in early, we always made room available. If we needed to stay late, she was always just so great to work with, Gail, and I want you to know that, because we had a good time. And with Dan, no one will ever do what he did. I used to go to his practices because I wanted to see how he handled his kids. Wow. You'd go one time, it was like professional wrestling. They were hitting each other, banging each other, getting fight with each other. Holy mother, is this what it's about? But boy, he could coach it. He could coach it. And we were so honored to have Bump and Christine, because they wanted everything for you. They wanted no credit for anything that went on at the university. It was always the kids first, the coaches second. And that meant so much, because they could have really tooted their horns with what these two did at that time, because, you know, we were pretty good in quite a few sports. I came in with football, was not very good. And we went to the College World Series in 1972, and Bump probably gave me the greatest compliment I've ever had. He says, "You saved the program at the University of Iowa that year by winning the Big Ten, going to the College World Series." So, I mean, I just got a sniff of it. Gail, she took up residency there. She was there so many times, but we were fortunate to have these two people on our side and not competing against them.
Anybody out there have any questions for this panel on Bump or Christine? It's such, I will say, I think everybody were in unanimity on the fact that we truly were blessed to work for the people that we did. And sometimes I get a little choked up about it, because you know, Christine I haven't seen in a while, and of course Bump we lost about 1.5 years ago, so I know they're both with us today. We love them, we respect them, and we thank our panel and Dan here. This is the quietest Dan's been in a long time. See right here? So thank you for being here. We've got another panel starting at 2 o'clock, and that's going to be concerning Hayden Frye, and a number of the sports writers that worked for him his whole career are going to be here. So hopefully we'll see you back here. And once again, Gail Blevins, Dr. Amy Wilson, and Dwayne Banks, and very much. And thank you for listening to us.